The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and Rachel stepped into the most impressive lobby she'd ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in streams of morning sunlight that bounced off the polished marble floors. Everything screamed money and success. She adjusted her blazer and tried to calm the butterflies in her stomach. This was it, the meeting she'd been preparing for all week. Sterling Technologies was her company's biggest client, and after 6 months of working with them remotely, she was finally here in person. Her boss had made it clear how important this presentation was. Mess this up and her job might be on the line. No pressure or anything. Rachel checked in at the reception desk, trying to appear more confident than she felt. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and an even more perfect smile, told her someone would be down shortly to escort her upstairs. She found a seat in the waiting area and placed her leather portfolio on her lap. Inside were her presentation notes, printouts of their marketing campaigns, and charts showing the impressive results they'd achieved. She'd gone through everything 3 times last night to make sure it was perfect. What she didn't know was that her ultrasound photo from 8 months ago had somehow slipped between the pages. She'd been sorting through old papers at home, trying to organize her life like she always promised herself she would. The photo must have fallen into her work folder. It was the kind of mistake anyone could make when you're a single mom running on 4 hours of sleep. She glanced at her watch. 10 minutes until the meeting. Her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor asking if she needed her to pick up the baby from daycare later. Rachel quickly typed back a thank you and slipped her phone into her purse. She took a deep breath. Focus. She needed to focus. The elevator across the lobby opened again, and Rachel looked up expecting to see an assistant or maybe a junior executive. Instead, a man in an expensive navy suit stepped out. He was tall, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair and the kind of presence that made people notice him. She recognized him immediately from the photos on the company website. Alexander Sterling. The CEO himself. Her heart skipped. Why was the CEO coming down to meet her? This wasn't normal. Usually, meetings like this happened with marketing directors or maybe a vice president. She stood up quickly, nearly dropping her portfolio in the process. He walked directly toward her, his expression unreadable. Ms. Chen, I'm Alex Sterling. I thought I'd personally welcome you to our headquarters. His voice was smooth, professional, but there was something cold about it. This was a man who was used to being in control of every situation. Rachel shook his hand, trying not to seem as nervous as she felt. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Sterling. Thank you for taking the time. Please call me Alex. Shall we head up? He gestured toward the elevator. As they walked, Rachel tried to make small talk about the impressive building and the view of the city. He responded politely, but without much warmth. She got the sense that he was one of those CEOs who was all business all the time, the kind of person who probably worked 16-hour days and expected everyone else to do the same. They rode the elevator to the 20th floor in uncomfortable silence. Rachel clutched her portfolio tighter. When the doors opened, they walked through a series of corridors with glass-walled conference rooms where people were already deep in meetings. Finally, they reached a large conference room with a massive table and chairs that probably cost more than her car. The rest of the team will join us in a few minutes, Alex said, taking a seat at the head of the table. Would you like some water or coffee while we wait? Water would be great, thank you. He pressed a button on the table, and within seconds an assistant appeared with bottles of sparkling and still water. Rachel chose still, not wanting to risk burping halfway through her presentation. She set her portfolio on the table and started pulling out her materials, arranging them neatly in front of her. That's when it happened. As she pulled out a stack of papers, they caught on something inside the folder. Papers went flying across the polished table, some sliding all the way to where Alex sat, others floating to the floor. Rachel's face burned with embarrassment. I'm so sorry, she stammered, rushing to gather everything. Alex stood up to help, bending down to pick up the papers that had fallen near his chair. That's when his hand froze. Rachel saw him staring at something, his expression changing from polite professionalism to something she couldn't quite read. Shock? Confusion? She followed his gaze and felt her stomach drop. He was holding her ultrasound photo. The black and white image was unmistakable. A tiny baby in profile, the date printed clearly in the corner. February 14th of last year. Valentine's Day. A day she remembered for very different reasons than most people. Rachel moved quickly, reaching across the table. That's personal. I'm sorry, it shouldn't have been in there. She practically snatched it from his hand and shoved it back into her portfolio, her face burning even hotter now. But the damage was done. She'd seen his face. He'd gone pale, almost gray, and he was staring at her now with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. His eyes moved from her face to the portfolio and back again, like he was trying to solve some complicated puzzle. Are you all right, Mr. Sterling? She asked, genuinely concerned. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. He blinked, seeming to snap out of whatever trance he'd been in. Yes, I'm fine, just that date. It caught my attention. His voice was strange now, distant. Rachel's mind raced. What could possibly be significant about that date to him? It was just a random Tuesday in February. Well, not random to her. It was the day she'd found out she was going to be a mother. The day her whole world had shifted on its axis. Before she could respond, the conference room door opened and 3 other executives walked in, all smiles and handshakes. Rachel forced herself to switch gears, greeting each of them professionally while desperately trying to forget what had just happened. But as she set up her laptop for the presentation, she kept catching Alex staring at her. Not in a creepy way, but like he was searching for something, like she held the answer to a question he hadn't asked yet. The presentation went smoothly enough, though Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that Alex wasn't really listening. He nodded in the right places, asked a few questions, but there was a distraction in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The other executives seemed pleased with her work, praising the campaign results and asking thoughtful questions about future strategies. But Alex was quiet. Too quiet. At one point, she caught him staring at her hands. Then her face. Then looking away quickly when she noticed. It was unsettling. When the meeting finally ended 90 minutes later, Rachel packed up her things carefully, making absolutely sure that ultrasound photo was buried deep in her bag where it belonged. The executives shook her hand, thanked her for coming, and promised to be in touch about the next phase of their partnership. Alex walked her back to the elevator, which felt unnecessary, but she wasn't about to question the CEO. As they waited for the doors to open, he turned to her. Ms. Chen, can I ask you something personal? Her heart started racing again. Of course, that photo. The baby, is it yours? Rachel hesitated. Something about this conversation felt dangerous, though she couldn't say why. Yes, she finally answered. My daughter. She's 7 months old now. The elevator arrived and the doors opened. Rachel stepped inside, eager to escape this strange interaction. As the doors started to close, she saw his face one last time. He looked devastated, like she'd just confirmed his worst fear. The doors closed and Rachel leaned against the elevator wall, her heart pounding. What on earth had just happened up there? Why would a CEO care about her baby? Why had that date affected him so strongly? As the elevator descended, taking her back to ground level and away from the strange intensity of that conference room, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something had just shifted. That dropping that ultrasound photo had set something in motion that she didn't understand yet. She had no idea how right she was. Outside, she walked to her car in the parking garage, replaying every moment of that meeting in her head. The way he'd stared at the date, the way he'd looked at her afterward, the personal question about her daughter, none of it made sense. Rachel drove home on autopilot, her mind spinning. She needed to pick up baby Lily from daycare, get home, make dinner, give her a bath, and somehow finish the follow-up email she'd promised to send by end of day. Single mom life didn't stop just because she'd had the weirdest meeting of her career. But as she pulled into the daycare parking lot and walked inside to get her daughter, she couldn't shake the image of Alex Sterling's face when he'd seen that ultrasound. The shock, the recognition, the devastation, what could it possibly mean? Alex sat alone in his office long after everyone else had left the building. The city lights twinkled through his floor-to-ceiling windows, but he wasn't seeing them. He was seeing that ultrasound photo. That date, February 14th. A date burned into his memory for all the wrong reasons. He loosened his tie and poured himself a drink from the crystal decanter on his desk. The whiskey burned going down, but it didn't help. Nothing could erase what he was thinking, what he was remembering. 9 months before that ultrasound date would have been May of last year, May 18th to be exact, the night of the charity gala. The night his entire life had fallen apart. The night he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. His engagement had ended that morning. 5 years with Victoria. And it had all come crashing down when he'd overheard her on the phone with her friend. She hadn't loved him. Had never loved him. She'd loved his money, his status, the lifestyle he could provide. The words still stung even now, almost a year and a half later. Of course I don't love him. But have you seen his portfolio? I'd be an idiot to walk away now. He'd confronted her immediately. She hadn't even tried to deny it. Had just shrugged and said that's how the world worked, and he was naive if he thought otherwise. She'd moved out that afternoon, taking most of her things and leaving a hole in his life that he'd thought would kill him. But he'd still had to go to the gala that night. It was his company's event, his name on everything. He couldn't just not show up because his personal life was in shambles. So he'd gone, and he'd drunk way too much champagne trying to numb the pain. That's where his memory got fuzzy. He remembered standing on the balcony, staring at the city lights, wondering how he'd been so blind. And then there had been a woman, someone he didn't know. She'd come outside for air and found him there. They'd started talking. He closed his eyes, trying to pull up more details. What had she looked like? He remembered kind eyes, a gentle voice. She hadn't known who he was, which had been refreshing. She'd just seen a sad man at a party and decided to be nice. They'd talked for hours. About life, about disappointment, about starting over. And then there had been more drinks, dancing, a cab ride. His penthouse apartment. Clothes on the floor. Her laugh in the darkness. The feeling of not being alone for just one night. He'd woken up the next morning with a splitting headache and an empty bed. She'd left no note, no number, nothing. He hadn't even gotten her full name. Just Rachel, she'd said when they'd met on that balcony. In his drunken state, he hadn't thought to ask for more. He'd felt guilty for weeks afterward. Not because of Victoria, who he'd already broken up with, but because he'd been so drunk he could barely remember the woman's face. It wasn't who he was. He didn't do one-night stands. He didn't drink until he blacked out. But grief and anger had made him someone he didn't recognize that night. Eventually, he'd pushed it out of his mind. Chalked it up to a bad night during a bad time in his life. Moved on. Built his company even bigger. Focused on work because work didn't betray you. But now, sitting in his office with that ultrasound date echoing in his mind, he couldn't ignore the math. 9 months before February 14th was May, mid-May. The timing matched perfectly. And when he'd seen Rachel Chen standing in his lobby today, something had nagged at him. A sense of familiarity he couldn't place, until he'd seen that ultrasound photo. Then everything had clicked into place like a puzzle he hadn't known he was solving. The kind eyes, the gentle voice, the woman from the balcony, the woman from that night. It was her, which meant the baby in that ultrasound was his daughter. Alex set his glass down with shaking hands. He had a child, a 7-month-old daughter he'd known nothing about. All this time she'd been out there in the world and he'd been completely oblivious. His first reaction was anger. Why hadn't Rachel told him? How could she keep something like this from him? But then reality set in. She probably didn't know how to find him. He'd never given her his last name that night. Had barely given her his first name, as drunk as he'd been. And even if she'd tried to look for him, how would she have done it? Alex from the charity gala wasn't exactly specific information. Still, she worked with his company. Had for 6 months, according to her file. Surely she'd realized who he was at some point. He pulled up her employee information on his computer. Well, contractor information. She worked for Madison Marketing Group, the agency Sterling Tech had hired to handle their campaigns. He scrolled through her profile. 28 years old. Bachelor's degree in marketing. 5 years of experience. Professional photo showing a woman with warm brown eyes and a genuine smile. He clicked through to her company's website and found more information. She'd been assigned to the Sterling account from the beginning, but all their interactions had been through email and video calls, and now that he thought about it, she'd always kept her camera off during calls, citing bandwidth issues or technical problems. Had she been avoiding him? Had she recognized his name and panicked? Alex pulled up the security footage from the charity gala last May. It took him nearly an hour to find the right timestamp, but there it was. Him, standing on the balcony looking miserable, and then her, stepping outside in a simple blue dress. They talked, laughed. He watched himself stumble slightly, clearly already too drunk. Watched her steady him with a concerned expression. They stayed on that balcony for almost 2 hours before heading back inside. He fast-forwarded through the footage, following them through the venue. More drinks, dancing, and then leaving together in a taxi. The footage confirmed what he already knew. That woman on the tape was definitely Rachel Chen. His phone rang, startling him out of his thoughts. It was his assistant, probably calling to confirm tomorrow's schedule. He let it go to voicemail. He couldn't think about tomorrow right now. He could barely process today. A daughter. He had a daughter. What did she look like? Did she have his eyes? His smile? What was her name? Did she sleep through the night? What made her laugh? The questions flooded his mind faster than he could process them. 7 months old. She'd been alive for 7 months and he'd missed all of it. Her birth, her first smile, her learning to roll over, to sit up, to grab things. All the moments he could never get back. Part of him wanted to drive to Rachel's house right now and demand answers. Demand to meet his child, but he didn't even know where she lived. And showing up unannounced would probably terrify her. This had to be handled carefully. He looked at the time. Almost midnight. He'd been sitting in his office for 5 hours, lost in memories and realizations. His driver had probably gone home hours ago. Most nights, Alex worked late enough that he just slept on the couch in his office. Tonight would be another one of those nights, though he doubted he'd actually sleep. He pulled up Rachel's contact information again. Her email, her office phone number, the address of her company's building. He could reach out tomorrow, request another meeting. But what would he say? Hey, I think I might be your baby's father because I vaguely remember a night we both probably want to forget. No, he needed proof first. Not that he doubted the math or the timing, but because this was too important to approach without being absolutely certain. He needed to talk to her, needed to ask her directly about that night, about the baby, about why she'd kept this from him. Alex spent the rest of the night alternating between pacing his office and staring at that security footage, watching himself with Rachel, trying to remember more details. The way she'd thrown her head back when she laughed, the way she'd touched his arm when she was making a point, the way she'd looked at him with concern when he'd nearly fallen off the curb outside the venue. She'd been kind to him that night. A stranger who'd seen someone hurting and decided to help. He'd repaid that kindness by getting her pregnant and then forgetting she existed. The guilt sat in his stomach like a rock. By the time the sun started rising over the city, Alex had made his decision. He couldn't let another day pass without knowing the truth. He'd go to her office today. He'd ask her directly, and if that baby was his, then he'd figure out what came next. He'd fix this. He had to. At 7 in the morning, he finally headed down to the company gym in the basement and took a shower in the locker room. He kept spare suits in his office for nights like this, so by 8 o'clock, he looked like his normal professional self. No one would know he'd spent the entire night spiraling over a dropped ultrasound photo. His assistant arrived at 8:30, surprised to see him already there and looking like he'd been up for hours. Which he had. She brought him coffee and his schedule for the day, but Alex was barely listening. He was rehearsing what he'd say to Rachel. How do you ask someone if you're the father of their child from a one-night stand you barely remember? By 9 o'clock, he couldn't wait any longer. He pulled up Rachel's office address and told his assistant to clear his morning. He had an urgent meeting to attend. She looked confused, since nothing urgent was on his calendar, but she knew better than to question him. The drive to Madison Marketing Group took 25 minutes in morning traffic. Alex used every second of it to practice his approach. Be calm, be direct. Don't accuse, just ask. Give her a chance to explain. He owed her that much. Their office was in a modest building downtown, nothing like the gleaming tower Sterling Tech called home. Alex parked in the visitor lot and sat in his car for a full 5 minutes, gathering his courage. This was it. The conversation that would change everything. He walked into the building and approached the reception desk. I'm here to see Rachel Chen. I don't have an appointment, but it's urgent. The receptionist looked skeptical. Let me check if she's available. Who should I say is asking? Alex Sterling. The woman's eyes widened slightly. She definitely recognized the name. She picked up her phone and made a quiet call. After a moment, she hung up and pointed toward the elevator. 6th floor. She said she'll meet you in conference room B. Alex thanked her and headed up. His heart was pounding. This was really happening. In a few minutes, he'd know for sure. In a few minutes, his entire life might change. The elevator doors opened, and there she was, Rachel Chen, standing in the hallway outside conference room B, looking nervous and confused. She was wearing a simple black dress and had her arms crossed defensively across her chest. "Mr. Sterling," she said carefully, "this is unexpected. Is there a problem with yesterday's presentation?" Alex took a deep breath. There was no easy way to do this. "We need to talk. In private, please." Something in his tone must have warned her this was serious. Her face paled slightly, but she nodded and led him into the conference room. She closed the door behind them and stood there, waiting. Alex didn't sit down. Neither did she. They faced each other across the empty conference table like two people about to negotiate a deal that neither of them wanted to make. "That photo yesterday," Alex began. "The ultrasound. You said the baby was 7 months old now." Rachel nodded slowly, her expression guarded. "Yes. Why?" "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." He paused, gathering his courage. "Were you at a charity gala last May? The Sterling Tech fundraiser?" He watched the color drain from her face, watched her hands start to shake. That was all the confirmation he needed, but he had to hear her say it. She started, then stopped. "Yes, I was there." The conference room felt like it was closing in on Rachel. She gripped the back of a chair to steady herself, her knuckles turning white. This couldn't be happening, not now, not like this. "You remember?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. Alex took a step closer. "Pieces of it. I remember the balcony. I remember talking to you. I remember." He trailed off, his jaw tight. "I've spent all night looking at security footage, doing the math. That baby, is she mine?" Rachel's first instinct was to deny it, to protect her daughter from a man who was essentially a stranger. But looking at his face, at the desperate need for truth in his eyes, she couldn't lie. She was terrible at lying anyway. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to sit down. "Yes," she said quietly. "She's yours." The words hung in the air between them. Alex grabbed the edge of the table like he needed the support. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant noise of office life continuing normally outside this room where everything was falling apart. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was strained, caught between anger and hurt. Rachel looked up at him, her own emotions threatening to spill over. "Tell you? How was I supposed to tell you? You left me your first name and nothing else. I woke up alone in your apartment with the worst headache of my life and no idea who you really were. You could have looked for me. You've been working with my company for 6 months. I tried to look for you." Rachel's voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. "Do you know how many men named Alex there are in this city? I checked the charity gala guest list, but it was massive and only listed companies, not individual names. I spent weeks searching and I got nowhere." She stood up, pacing now because sitting still was impossible. "And by the time I found out I was pregnant, I saw your engagement announcement in the business news. I thought you were getting married. What was I supposed to do? Call your office and say, 'Hey, I'm the woman you slept with while drunk, and surprise, you're going to be a father?'" Alex's expression shifted. "My engagement announcement? That was before the gala. My engagement ended the morning of the gala. That's why I was such a mess that night." Rachel stopped pacing. "What?" "Victoria and I broke up that day. The announcement you saw was probably from weeks earlier. We'd been engaged for months before that night." He ran a hand through his hair, looking exhausted. "I found out she never loved me, just loved my money. The gala was the same night and I couldn't cancel, so I went and tried to drink away the pain. That's not an excuse," he added quickly. "I shouldn't have drunk that much. Shouldn't have put you in that position." Rachel sat back down, processing this information. All this time, she'd thought she was protecting a man's marriage, thought she was doing the right thing by staying quiet. "I didn't know. I just saw your name in that announcement and I thought I was doing the right thing, leaving you alone." "When did you find out about the pregnancy?" "About 2 weeks after the gala. I took 3 tests because I couldn't believe it. We'd been careful, or at least I thought we had, but clearly not careful enough. She met his eyes. I panicked. I was 27 with a job I was still trying to prove myself in. No relationship, no support system, really. My parents passed away a few years ago and I'm an only child. I had no idea what to do. Alex pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. But you decided to keep the baby. Of course I did. Rachel's voice was firm now. She's my daughter. Yes, she wasn't planned, and yes, the circumstances were far from ideal. But she's mine, and I love her more than anything in this world. What's her name? Rachel hesitated, then answered. Lily. Her name is Lily. Lily, Alex repeated softly, testing the name. A ghost of a smile crossed his face before disappearing. I have a daughter named Lily, and I've never even met her. The pain in his voice made Rachel's chest ache. She'd spent 7 months being angry at a man who'd forgotten her, who'd left her to deal with everything alone. But looking at him now, she realized he hadn't known. He'd been just as lost as she was, dealing with his own heartbreak, completely unaware that their one night together had created a life. I'm sorry, she said, meaning it. I should have tried harder to find you. Should have reached out to your company or something. I was scared and I convinced myself that you didn't need to know, that I could handle it on my own. And did you? Handle it on your own? Rachel let out a bitter laugh. Barely. The first 3 months were a nightmare. Morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion, fear. I worked right up until I went into labor because I couldn't afford to take unpaid leave any earlier. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, watched Lily while I was in the hospital. A 70-year-old woman with bad knees was my birthing partner because I had no one else. She could see the guilt washing over Alex's face with every word. Good. Maybe he should feel guilty. She'd been feeling guilty for 9 months. After Lily was born, Rachel continued, I had 6 weeks of leave and then I had to go back to work. Daycare costs more than you can imagine. I'm constantly exhausted. I haven't slept more than 4 hours straight since she was born. My career is basically stalled because I can't work late or travel for clients. And every single day, I look at my beautiful daughter and wonder if I'm doing enough for her. Alex was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I want to meet her. I want to be part of her life. No. The word came out harsher than Rachel intended. Alex's head snapped up. What do you mean, no? She's my daughter, too. She's a baby who doesn't know you. You can't just walk into her life because biology says you're her father. You're a stranger to her. You're a stranger to me. I'm her father. You're a man I spent one night with over a year ago. Rachel stood up again, her protective instincts kicking in. I don't know you. I don't know if you're safe around children. I don't know what kind of person you are beyond the fact that you run a successful company and drink too much at charity events. That was a low blow, and she knew it. Alex's face hardened. So what are you saying? I have no rights to my own child? I'm saying you need to slow down. You can't just demand to be part of her life and expect me to hand her over. I've been her entire world for 7 months. I've been the one up at 3 in the morning when she's sick. The one changing diapers and singing lullabies and worrying about every little thing. Where were you? I didn't know. I know that. Rachel's voice cracked. I know, and I'm sorry, but it doesn't change the fact that you're essentially a stranger, asking me to trust you with the most precious thing in my life. The silence that followed was heavy with everything they weren't saying. All the fear, the anger, the guilt, the overwhelming complexity of the situation they'd created. Finally, Alex spoke, his voice calmer now. You're right. I'm sorry. It's a lot, for both of us. He took a deep breath. But Rachel, please understand. I just found out I have a daughter, a child I didn't know existed. You've had months to process this, to adjust, to bond with her. I've had less than 24 hours and I'm trying not to fall apart. Rachel could see the truth of that in his eyes. The man in front of her looked like he hadn't slept, like he was barely holding himself together. She felt her anger deflating slightly. I know, she said more gently. I know this is hard for you too, but Lily has to come first. Her safety, her stability, her well-being. That has to be the priority here. Agreed, Alex said immediately. So what do you suggest? How do we do this? Rachel sat back down and thought about it. She'd spent months imagining this conversation in different versions, but none of them had felt quite like this. None of them had involved a man who seemed genuinely devastated at having missed his daughter's first months of life. We need to take this slow, she finally said. We need to get to know each other first. Not as two drunk people at a party, but as actual people. If you're going to be in Lily's life, I need to know who you are. I need to trust you. Okay, Alex agreed. How do we do that? We meet, we talk. We spend time together without Lily first until I'm comfortable that you're not going to disappear or hurt her, or mess up her routine. Rachel was making this up as she went along, but it felt right. I need to know you're serious about this, that you're not just reacting to shock, and that you're going to stick around. Alex leaned forward, his expression intense. I'm not going anywhere. I don't walk away from my responsibilities. She's not a responsibility, Rachel said sharply. She's a little girl who deserves parents who love her, not parents who feel obligated to her. That's not what I meant. Alex rubbed his face tiredly. I'm handling this badly. I'm sorry. I've been up all night and I'm saying everything wrong. Looking at him, Rachel felt a flicker of sympathy. He really did look exhausted. When's the last time you slept? Last night before the gala. The charity gala from last year, I mean. I don't think I've actually slept since then. He attempted a weak smile. That's not true. I've slept. Just not much, Rachel shook her head. You need to go home and rest. We can't have this conversation when you're running on fumes. I don't want to waste time. It's not wasting time. It's being smart. Rachel pulled out her phone. What's your number? Alex rattled it off and she saved it in her contacts. I'll text you tomorrow and we can meet for coffee or something. Somewhere public, somewhere we can talk without offices and workspaces complicating things. Tomorrow feels like forever. It's one day, Alex. You've already waited 7 months without knowing. One more day won't kill you. She stood up, signaling the end of this conversation. Go home, sleep, process all of this. Then we'll talk. He stood too, looking like he wanted to argue, but then seemed to think better of it. You'll really text me? You won't disappear? The vulnerability in his voice surprised her. I won't disappear. I promise. They walked to the door together. Rachel opened it, and they stepped out into the hallway where everything was normal. People working at desks, phone calls happening, coffee being drunk. A world that had no idea that in that conference room, two lives had just collided in the most permanent way possible. Thank you, Alex said at the elevator, for being honest, for not running away or shutting me out completely. Thank you for caring, Rachel replied. A lot of men would have just walked away. I'm not a lot of men. The elevator arrived and Alex stepped inside. Tomorrow then? Tomorrow, Rachel confirmed. The doors closed and he was gone. Rachel stood in the hallway for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Her secret was out. Her daughter's father knew she existed. Everything was about to change. She pulled out her phone and looked at the photo on her lock screen. Lily, smiling her gummy smile, one tiny hand reaching toward the camera. Her daughter. Their daughter. How was she supposed to explain to a 7-month-old that Daddy was about to enter the picture? Rachel walked back to her desk in a daze. Her coworker, Jennifer, looked up with concern. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Something like that, Rachel managed. I need to make a call. Can you cover for me? She didn't wait for an answer. Just grabbed her purse and headed for the stairwell where she could have privacy. She dialed Mrs. Patterson, her neighbor and babysitter. Hi, sweetie. The older woman answered. Everything okay? You don't usually call during the day. Is Lily all right? She's perfect. Sleeping like an angel right now. Why, what's wrong? Rachel slid down the wall until she was sitting on the stairs. Everything's about to change, Mrs. Patterson. Lily's father found out about her. Oh, honey. How did that happen? It's a long story. Rachel closed her eyes. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm making the right choices. You're protecting your baby, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. That's always the right choice. Everything else you'll figure out as you go. Rachel hoped she was right. 3 weeks had passed since that confrontation in the conference room. and Rachel's life had become something she never expected. She sat across from Alex at the small coffee shop near her apartment, the same place they'd been meeting almost every other day since that first conversation. It had started awkwardly. Two strangers who'd created a life together, trying to figure out how to be in each other's world. That first coffee meeting had been stiff and formal, both of them dancing around the real issues, talking about work and weather and anything but the baby girl who connected them. But gradually something had shifted. Maybe it was the second meeting, when Alex had shown up looking nervous and asked her to tell him everything about Lily. Not just facts, but everything. What made her laugh? What scared her? Did she sleep with a nightlight? What songs did Rachel sing to her? He'd pulled out his phone and taken notes like he was preparing for the most important business presentation of his life. Or maybe it was the third meeting, when Rachel had admitted she was terrified she wasn't good enough, that she was failing Lily every day just by being exhausted and broke and alone. And Alex had looked at her like she was crazy and told her that Lily was clearly thriving, healthy and happy, which meant Rachel was doing an amazing job. It was the first time anyone had said that to her, and she'd cried right there in the coffee shop. Now, sitting across from him on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, Rachel realized she actually enjoyed his company. Somewhere between the awkward first meeting and today, Alex had stopped being the CEO who'd accidentally gotten her pregnant and started being a real person. Someone funny when he forgot to be serious. Someone thoughtful who remembered small details she mentioned. Someone who sent her articles about infant development at 2 a.m. because he'd been reading everything he could find about babies. So, Alex said, stirring his coffee nervously, "I think it's time." Rachel knew what he meant without him having to say it. They'd been building toward this for 3 weeks. "You want to meet her?" "I want to meet her," he confirmed. "If you think it's okay, if you trust me enough." Did she trust him? Rachel had asked herself that question every single day. Trust didn't come easily to her anymore, not after being left alone to deal with everything. But Alex had shown up to every single meeting, had answered every question she'd thrown at him, even the hard ones. Had been patient when she'd needed space and present when she'd needed support. He'd proven himself in small ways that added up to something bigger. "Okay," she said, and watched his face light up like she'd just given him the greatest gift in the world. "But we do this on my terms. At my apartment where she's comfortable, and if she gets upset or scared, you leave. No arguments." "Whatever you want," Alex agreed immediately. "When? Tomorrow? I have the day off and Mrs. Patterson was going to watch her, but I can cancel." "Tomorrow." He said it like a prayer. "What should I bring? Toys? Clothes? I don't know what babies need." Rachel couldn't help but smile at his nervousness. This powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms was terrified of meeting a 7-month-old. "Just bring yourself. And maybe keep your expectations realistic. She's a baby. She might cry. She might not want anything to do with you. That's normal." "Right. Normal. I can handle normal." He didn't look like he believed himself. They finished their coffee and walked out together. This had become their routine. Meet for an hour, talk, then go their separate ways. But tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow their worlds would truly collide. That night Rachel couldn't sleep. She kept checking on Lily, who was peacefully asleep in her crib, blissfully unaware that her life was about to include someone new, someone important. Rachel had cleaned the apartment 3 times, stressed about what to wear, and changed her mind about this decision at least a dozen times. Mrs. Patterson had noticed her anxiety when she'd stopped by earlier. "He seems like a good man," the older woman had said gently. "And that baby deserves to know her father." "I know," Rachel had replied. "I just want to protect her." "You are protecting her. By being careful, by taking your time, by making sure he's worthy. But honey, you also can't protect her from having a parent who wants to love her. That's not protection. That's fear." The words had stung because they were true. Rachel was scared. Scared that Alex would hurt Lily. Scared that he'd disappoint her. Scared that once he realized how hard parenting really was, he'd walk away. Scared that Rachel would have to watch her daughter's heart break. But she was also scared of the alternative, of keeping them apart and having Lily grow up asking why she didn't have a daddy, of denying her daughter a relationship with a man who seemed genuinely desperate to be part of her life. The next morning came too quickly. Rachel dressed Lily in her favorite purple onesie with little flowers on it. The baby babbled happily, grabbing at Rachel's hair while she changed her diaper. She had no idea this was a big day. To her, it was just another morning. Alex texted at exactly 10 o'clock. "I'm downstairs. Can I come up?" Rachel's hands shook as she typed back. "Apartment 4B. She heard his footsteps in the hallway before he knocked. 3 soft knocks, careful not to be too loud. When she opened the door, he stood there looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him. He was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, trying not to look like a CEO for once. In his hands was a small stuffed elephant, soft and gray. "Hi," he said. "Hi," Rachel replied. "Come in." He stepped into her small apartment and she saw him taking it all in. The tiny living room with toys scattered across the floor. The kitchen that was barely big enough for one person. The photos on the walls of Lily at various stages of her short life. This was her world. Small and humble and nothing like his penthouse. But it was home. "She's in her playpen," Rachel said, leading him to the living room, and there was Lily, sitting among her toys, chewing on a plastic ring, her dark hair sticking up in every direction. She looked up when they entered, her eyes curious about the stranger. Alex froze, just completely stopped moving. Rachel watched his face transform as he looked at his daughter for the first time. The nervousness melted away, replaced by pure wonder. His eyes filled with tears that he didn't bother to hide. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's teething," Rachel said, trying to break the emotional moment with practicality. "So she's kind of drooly and cranky. And she's been fighting her morning nap, so she might be fussy." But Alex wasn't listening. He couldn't take his eyes off Lily. "She has my nose." Rachel looked at her daughter and realized he was right. How had she never noticed that before? "And my eyes," she added. Lily, oblivious to the weight of the moment, threw her plastic ring and immediately started fussing because she couldn't reach it. Without thinking, Alex moved forward, picked up the ring, and held it out to her. Lily looked at the toy, then at him, then back at the toy. She reached for it with both hands. "Can I?" Alex looked at Rachel and she knew he was asking for more than just permission to give Lily the toy. "Sit down on the floor," Rachel instructed. "Let her come to you if she wants to. Don't grab her or try to pick her up. She needs to get used to you first." Alex sat down slowly, crossing his legs and still holding the toy. Lily watched him with the serious expression babies get when they're studying something new. Then, to Rachel's surprise, Lily reached out and grabbed his hand. Alex looked like he might fall apart right there. Lily pulled his hand toward her mouth, trying to gum his fingers like she did with everything these days. He laughed, a sound somewhere between joy and tears. "She's so small," he said, wonder in his voice. "She's actually pretty big for her age," Rachel said, sitting down on the couch to watch them. "She's in the 75th percentile for height." Over the next hour, Rachel watched something beautiful unfold. Alex, who'd been so nervous, seemed to melt around Lily. He talked to her in a soft voice, showed her the elephant he'd brought, made silly faces that got her to smile. When Lily started to get tired and fussy, he looked panicked until Rachel showed him how to gently bounce her and pat her back. "She likes being walked around," Rachel explained. "It calms her down." Alex stood up carefully with Lily in his arms, looking like he was holding something made of glass. He walked slowly around the small living room, swaying gently, and miraculously Lily started to settle. Her fussing stopped and she laid her head on his shoulder. Rachel's eyes burned with unexpected tears. She'd imagined this moment so many times, but the reality was different, better and scarier all at once. Watching this man hold their daughter, seeing the pure love on his face, made everything real in a way it hadn't been before. "She's falling asleep," Alex whispered, afraid to disturb her. "She usually naps around this time," Rachel said quietly. "You can put her in her crib if you want." Alex looked torn, clearly not wanting to let go, but he carried Lily to her nursery and gently laid her down. The baby sighed and rolled to her side, already deep in sleep. They stood there together watching her breathe, and Rachel felt Alex's hand slip into hers. "Thank you," he said softly. "Thank you for letting me meet her, for giving me this chance." They walked back to the living room, leaving the nursery door cracked open. Rachel sat on the couch, suddenly exhausted. Alex sat beside her, closer than he probably should have, but she didn't move away. "She's incredible," he said. "I can't believe I almost missed this. Almost missed knowing her." "You're here now," Rachel replied. "That's what matters. I want to be here more. I want to be part of her life, part of both your lives." He turned to look at her, "Not because I have to, Because I want to. Because watching her fall asleep on my shoulder just now was the best moment of my life. Rachel didn't know what to say to that. The intensity in his voice scared her a little. This was moving fast. Too fast, maybe. But she couldn't deny that something had shifted today. Seeing him with Lily had changed something in her chest, had softened some of the walls she'd built. "We can arrange a schedule," she said, trying to keep things practical. "Maybe you can visit a few times a week? And eventually, when she's older, maybe she could stay with you sometimes. I want to help with everything. Doctor's appointments, daycare costs, anything you need." "I don't need your money," Rachel said quickly. "I know you don't need it. But I want to contribute. She's my daughter, too." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Rachel, I've missed 7 months of her life. 7 months of diapers and midnight feedings and doctor visits. You've done all of this alone, and that's not fair. Let me help, please." Rachel wanted to argue, wanted to insist she was fine on her own. But the truth was she was exhausted. Financially, emotionally, physically exhausted. And here was someone offering to share the load, not because he pitied her, but because he genuinely wanted to be involved. "Okay," she said quietly. "We can work something out." They spent the rest of Lily's nap time talking about practical things, schedules and routines and what Lily needed. But underneath the practical conversation was something else, an awareness of each other that hadn't been there before. Rachel noticed the way Alex smiled when he talked about Lily. Alex noticed the way Rachel's eyes softened when she looked toward the nursery. When Lily woke up an hour later, crying for food, Alex watched Rachel prepare a bottle like he was memorizing every step. She let him feed Lily, coaching him through it, and his face when Lily grabbed his finger while drinking was priceless. "I could stay for a while," he offered when the bottle was empty. "If you want company, I can help with whatever you need to do." Rachel should have said no, should have maintained boundaries, but instead she heard herself say, "I need to do laundry. You could watch her while I fold." So Alex sat on the floor of her living room, playing with his daughter while Rachel folded tiny clothes and tried to process what her life was becoming. This man who'd been a stranger 3 weeks ago was now in her apartment, making her daughter giggle, and somehow it felt right. When he finally left that evening, after dinner and Lily's bath and one more feeding, Rachel closed the door behind him and leaned against it. Mrs. Patterson appeared from her apartment across the hall, eyebrows raised in question. "So?" the older woman asked. "So?" Rachel repeated, then smiled despite herself. "I think he's going to stick around." "Good," Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "That baby needs her daddy, and between you and me, you could use someone in your corner, too." That night after Lily was asleep, Rachel's phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Thank you for today, for trusting me with her, for letting me be part of this. I know I have a lot to prove, but I promise I'm not going anywhere." Rachel read the message 3 times before responding. "You did good today. Same time next week? How about tomorrow?" Came the immediate reply. Rachel laughed. "Slow down. But maybe Wednesday?" "Wednesday it is. Sleep well, Rachel." "You too, Alex." She put her phone down and checked on Lily one more time like she did every night. Her daughter slept peacefully, one fist curled near her mouth, completely unaware that her world had just expanded to include someone new, someone who'd looked at her like she hung the moon, someone who was going to be part of their lives now, for better or worse. Rachel got ready for bed, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. 3 weeks ago, her life had been complicated but manageable. Just her and Lily against the world. Now there was Alex, with his genuine smiles and his terrible diaper-changing technique and his obvious love for a daughter he barely knew. It should have terrified her. Maybe it did, a little. But as she fell asleep, Rachel realized something surprising. For the first time since Lily was born, she didn't feel quite so alone. And that was worth more than she'd expected. 4 months could change everything. Rachel knew that now as she stood in her kitchen making breakfast while Alex sat on the floor teaching Lily how to stack blocks. Their daughter, now 11 months old, was on the verge of walking and absolutely determined to destroy any tower Alex managed to build. It had become their Saturday morning routine. Alex would arrive at 8 with fresh bagels and coffee, and they'd spend the morning together as a family. That word still felt strange to Rachel. Family. But that's what they'd become. Somehow, in the space of 16 weeks. After that first meeting, Alex had thrown himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to everything else. He'd shown up every Wednesday and Saturday without fail, even when he was exhausted from work. He'd learned Lily's schedule better than some people knew their own.